Item the first, said the Duke of Belmont, without looking up from his pen. A Duchess of Belmont does not laugh in the corridors. Item the second, she does not address the servants by their given names. Item the third, she does not go out of doors before 8 without a footman, a bonnet, and a reason. Are there many more? Asked the young woman standing on the other side of his desk, and she sounded, Sebastian noted with irritation, as though she were enjoying herself. 27 in all. My grandmother informs me that she intends you for the position. I intend to spare you the discovery of what the position costs. He blotted the page, folded it once, and held it out. Read it tonight. Give me your answer at breakfast. I shall not think the worse of you for refusing. Indeed, I shall think rather better of you. Miss Verity Alderton took the paper. She was the daughter of a country naturalist and the goddaughter of his late aunt. She had arrived at Belmont Hall 3 days ago in a gig with a trunk and a wooden box of specimen drawers, and she had already been heard laughing in the corridors twice. She read the list where she stood. It took her some time. Sebastian, who was a man of exact habits and had ruled 4,000 acres and a coal seam since he was 24, discovered that he did not like being watched reading and disliked far more being unable to see her face behind the paper. Well, he said at last. Item the 19th, Verity said. A Duchess of Belmont does not argue with her husband in the hearing of others. Does she argue with him out of the hearing of others? She does not argue with him at all. Then how does he ever learn anything? Sebastian set down his pen. Miss Alderton, this house has 111 years of precedent and a great many eyes upon it. My father's wife broke a dozen of those rules in her first season and was destroyed for it, and my father, who loved her, permitted it, because he could not bear to be laughed at. I do not intend to repeat either of their mistakes. I am offering you the truth in 27 parts, which is more than most men offer any woman. Something went out of her face, some of the mischief, and what came in instead was worse. She looked at him as though she had understood something he had not said. Thank you, Verity said. Truly, may I keep it? You may burn it. No, she said, folding it with great care into the front of her gown. I shall keep it. Good night, your grace. At breakfast she did not refuse him. She did not accept him either. She asked whether the South Lake was spring-fed and was gone out of doors by 6:30. Item the third, gone before the end of the week. He saw her from the library window at 7:20, bonnetless, hemmed to the knee in dew, kneeling on the bank of the South Lake with a jar in her hand. He rang and asked whether Miss Alderton had taken a footman. She asked Thomas would he rather carry a jar or finish his breakfast, your grace, said the butler. He finished his breakfast. And the reason? She said the reason was in the jar, your grace. Sebastian went down to the lake himself. It was, he told himself, a matter of establishing the point. You will take a chill, he said to her back. I shall take a chill and a specimen, and only one of them is rare. She held the jar up without turning. Inside, something small and green hung suspended. There, do you see the gills? That is a crested newt, and your keeper has been draining this lake since March because he thinks the seepage is spoiling the lower meadow. It is not the seepage. It is the culvert under the drive, which is blocked, which is also why your drive floods every October, and your grandmother complains of it, and nobody can discover why. Sebastian stood in the wet grass in boots that cost more than the keeper's annual wage, and found he had nothing to say. Item the third, Verity said, standing and turning, and there was a smudge of mud along her jaw and her eyes were absolutely level with his. I have broken it before 8, without a bonnet, with a reason. Would you like the reason, or would you prefer the bonnet? You are impossible. I am useful, she said. It is often mistaken for the same thing. He had the culvert opened on the Tuesday. 11 barrelloads of silt and a dead ash root came out of it. The drive did not flood in October for the first time in 9 years. She did not say a word about it. That was the beginning of the trouble. Because by then Sebastian had begun, against every principle he possessed, to watch for the list. Item the second went next. She called the second housemaid Annie and the under-gardener Ned, and when Sebastian mentioned it, she said that Annie's mother was dying at Kettlebrook, and that a woman with a dying mother ought to be called something other than a surname. Then she asked, quite without apology, whether the Belmont estate made any provision for such a case. And Sebastian, who had a private fund for exactly such cases, and had never told a living soul of it because he considered it nobody's business, found himself telling her. Item the 11th. A Duchess of Belmont does not speak of money went in the muniment room, where she looked over his shoulder at a column of figures, and observed that his agent had priced the new cottages at £320 each, and that his own father's accounts for 1798 showed the same cottages built for 11, and that either the price of brick had doubled or somebody had. Somebody had. Sebastian dismissed the agent in November. Item the 22nd. A Duchess of Belmont does not sing where she may be overheard when on a wet Sunday, and he stood outside the yellow drawing-room with his hand on the door for the whole of a Welsh air, and did not go in, and did not go away. And item the first, she laughed in the corridors constantly. She laughed in the long gallery under 11 generations of unamused Belmonts. She laughed on the stairs. She had a laugh like a window being opened in a shut-up room, and Sebastian, who had not laughed in that house since his father's funeral, began to find that the corridors were unbearably quiet whenever she was out. On a night in December, he came upon her at the gallery window with the list in her hand, and a pencil. "You are marking it," he said. "I am keeping the score." She turned it toward the candle, 27 lines, and against 19 of them in a small neat hand a date. "You gave me a list of things a duchess must not do. It has been the most useful document I have ever owned. Everything on it that I have broken has improved something: your drive, your cottages, your housemaid's mother, your lake. There are 8 left. Item the 7th is going to be difficult. I do not ride well enough yet." "You have been using it as a guide," Sebastian said slowly. "Of course I have. It is a complete account of everything your family was afraid of." She said it gently, which was somehow the unkindest way she could have said it. "Your Grace, I do not think you wrote it to frighten me. I think you wrote down every rule that was ever used to make your mother small, and you handed it to me because you wanted to know whether anybody would ever look at it and say, 'This is not a list of rules. This is a list of wounds.'" Sebastian could hear the long case clock at the end of the gallery, and his own pulse, and nothing else. "Give it back to me," he said. "No. Miss Alderton. You said I might burn it. You did not say I must return it." She folded it away. "Good night, Your Grace. Item the 14th tomorrow, I think. I mean to visit the Kettlebrook almshouse without sending word ahead, and if you wish to prevent me, you had better be at the stable by 7. He was at the stable by 7. He did not prevent her. He held her horse. His grandmother's 12th night party was the largest gathering Belmont Hall had held in a decade, and Sebastian's cousin Crandall came to it, with the look of a man carrying a card he had been saving. Crandall was heir presumptive. He had been heir presumptive for 11 years, and had spent most of them explaining to the county how sadly the Duke neglected society, and he had lately taken to explaining how sadly the Duke had been taken in by a naturalist's daughter with mud on her boots. He waited until after supper, when the drawing-room was full, and the candles were low, and the Dowager Duchess had asked Miss Alderton to play. "Before Miss Alderton favors us," Crandall said pleasantly, "I wonder whether the company might be diverted by a document. It came into my hands by accident, the merest accident, out of a book she left in the morning room. I confess I could not credit it." Sebastian saw the paper in his cousin's hand and knew it at 10 feet, and something in his chest went very cold and very still. "Things a Duchess of Belmont must not do," Crandall read. 27 items, ladies and gentlemen, in his Grace's own hand, and beside 19 of them dates in a lady's pencil. Item the first, does not laugh in the corridors, broken, the 4th of September. Item the second, does not address the servants by their given names, broken, the 12th of September. Item the 11th, does not speak of money, broken, October. Item the 22nd, does not sing where she may be overheard. "Broken," said Verity Alderton clearly, from the pianoforte, "the 1st of November, and again on the Sunday after. And I intend to break it presently, so you had better read faster." Somebody laughed. Crandall's color rose. "You find it amusing, madam. His Grace set down the conditions of the office, and you have kept a tally of your defiance of every one of them. There is not a house in this county that would receive a woman who—" "That will do," said Sebastian. He crossed the room. He did not hurry, because he had learned very young that a Belmont who hurries has already lost, and he held out his hand, and Crandall gave up the paper because there was nothing else in the world he could have done. Sebastian turned to the room. 50 faces, a great many of them the same faces that had looked at his mother 25 years ago. "My cousin is correct in every particular," he said. "I wrote this. I wrote it in September in my own study, and I gave it to Miss Alderton myself and invited her to read it and refuse me. He is correct also that she has kept a record. Since it is to be read, it shall be read properly. Permit me." He tilted the page to the candlelight. Item the first, a Duchess of Belmont does not laugh in the corridors. Broken, the 4th of September, and every day since, and my grandmother informs me that the house has not been so tolerable to live in since my father was a young man. "It has not," said the Dowager Duchess from her chair, with great composure. Item the second, she does not address the servants by their given names. Broken, the 12th of September. On that day Miss Alderton discovered that my second housemaid's mother was dying at Kettlebrook, a thing no one in my establishment had troubled to learn, and that girl was sent home for a fortnight at my expense, and I am ashamed that it took a stranger 3 days to find out what I had not found out in 3 years. The room had gone entirely quiet. Item the third, she does not go out of doors before 8, broken repeatedly. The first breach produced the discovery of a blocked culvert under my drive that had flooded it every autumn since I inherited. Item the 11th, she does not speak of money. Broken in October, when she compared my agent's estimate for 8 cottages with my father's accounts and found a difference of £100. That man is no longer in my service. Item the 14th, she does not visit a charity without sending word ahead. Broken in December deliberately, without word, at 7 in the morning, in the rain, which is how the trustees of the Kettlebrook Almshouse came to be replaced at the Epiphany sessions, and how 11 old women came to have coal this winter. Sebastian lowered the paper. 19 items, he said. 19 improvements to this estate, in 4 months, by a woman with mud on her boots. I wrote that list believing it was a list of rules. I am obliged to my cousin for making me read it aloud, because a man cannot hear his own words in a full room without discovering what they are. It is not a list of rules. It is an inventory of everything my family was ever afraid of, and every single item on it was written by fear and kept alive by cowardice. And I have been the chief coward of the line. Sebastian, his grandmother said quietly. There is a 28th item, he said. It is not in the original. Perhaps somebody will lend me a pencil. Verity Alderton rose from the pianoforte and walked the length of the drawing room and gave him hers. He wrote against the bottom of the page and read it out. Item the 28th. A Duchess of Belmont is not asked twice. He looked up, which obliges me to be careful since I have not yet asked once. 50 people held their breath together. Sebastian discovered that he did not care about a single one of them, which was, he thought, a very great deal of progress for one evening. Miss Alderton, he said, you have broken 19 of my rules and mended 19 of my failings, and I have been sitting in my library for 4 months listening for a laugh in a corridor like a man waiting for weather. I have nothing to offer you that you have not already improved. Will you marry me? She looked at the list in his hand, and then at him, and her chin came up in the way that always meant trouble. There are 8 items left, Verity said. We shall break them together, said the Duke of Belmont. I shall want instruction. Then yes, she said, and yes, and I shall not say it a third time because item the 28th forbids it. He took her hand and raised it to his lips, and held it a moment longer than the county considered necessary. And behind them, the Dowager Duchess told Crandall, in a voice pitched for carrying, that his carriage had been ordered. They were married in the spring in the chapel at Belmont, and the Duchess of Belmont laughed in the corridor on her way to the altar, which Sebastian had privately hoped for, and which the household staff had, it emerged, wagered upon. The list hung afterward in the study in a plain black frame, where the estate books were kept, and every autumn Sebastian took it down and read it through, because his wife insisted that a man ought to be reminded of what he had once been frightened of. There were, in the end, dates beside all 27 items. The 28th had no date, only a line drawn under it in her small, neat hand, and beneath that, in his own, added years later when their eldest was learning to write her letters at the same desk. For the avoidance of doubt, she was asked once, and it was the only wise thing I ever did.